All right. I believe I am live, but got to copy that link, put it in the Discord. See here. All right. As people filter in and so forth, I will just get things ready. You can see that nice art on the screen there of the Undersider's Loft. Let's see here. All right. Oh, it looks like we've got a wild M laugher. Vic is here, and we've got 2 plus 4 times 5. Greg's here as well. Um, okay. I think we might as well start. That's some good art. Yeah, I agree. I thought it was pretty excellent. That was generated last night. And oh, Janice is here. Cool. Um, yeah, it was done midstream. Okay, so probably gonna start in here. The notes are not super dense for this one, and so it's kind of and it's one chapter this week. It's only 2.9. We didn't read 2.x, so that will be saved for next week when we do the end of arc episode with Vic. So that'll be pretty cool. But 2.9. Taylor's worried about going back because she doesn't want to face down the others after yelling and storming out. I mean, very relatable, obviously. A lot of social pressure. Oh, you traced the gun? Wow, tracing. That's right. You said not to tell anyone. Then I told everyone instantly. Um, and yes, guest star Victoria. Victoria is, as far as I'm aware, going to uh, guest star on all the end of arc episodes. So should be pretty good. Um, so yeah, so she had stormed out before in the previous chapter 2.8. And so she's thinking about not only facing down Rachel, but also dealing with Lisa and Alec again. And how she kind of wants to apologize, but like she kind of thinks better of it. She justifies to herself that she is just sort of shaken because she's not used to raising her voice or using violence, but she will become very used to raising her voice and becoming violent in the future. So, she has that to look forward to. Um, there's an awkward silence when they walk in. The dogs have been sent to their room already, and Rachel scowls and Alec grins. Vic doesn't think that Alec grinning is very in character for him, but I actually think it is. He's just seen a great little display of violence, so, he's had his circus for the day. Let's see here. Tracing is a tool that comes with digital set, and as long as it's done correctly, shouldn't be so hated on, or digital art. Literally everyone loves her now. Yeah, Brian is like, that was hot. He's too lazy to grin, so he must have loved it. Um, yeah. Brian is in love with Taylor. Yeah, I mean, just like under the surface feelings. Um, let's see here. Oh yeah, I wrote just Alec is a fan of violence on the page. Lisa says, "Glad you came back." Lisa sends Alec to get the first aid kit, and Taylor gets some like active support from Taylor and Brian, or from Lisa and Brian, which I think is good. It's like the exact kind of thing she needs right now. Let's see here. She's like, I have done extensive and obsessive research on capes, and he's like, oh my God, marry me. Yeah, that is pretty much right. Um. Oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think Brian and Taylor are to hook up? And then M says literally 10. Wow. Um, Pretty likely then. Sounds like M is sure. Um, let's see here. Uh, bu, 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 bu. Okay, so Taylor sits on the arm of the couch and takes her sweatshirt off to investigate the damage from the dogs. She's finding injuries in like a lot of places on her stomach and back below her ribs, the hard to hide cut on her ear. She thinks about how she can hide almost all of this from her dad, except like maybe the ear and then the thing that happened to her like arm, where a big chunk got dragged out, an inch long gouge from a dog fang. Um, let's see here. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, more like on a scale from 10 to 10. Vic says, I give it like a 3. um, oh yeah. Okay, so blood is still welling out of her wound, and Taylor's like, Christ. Um, and she says that to herself, and Alec tells her, that was awesome, you know. I didn't think you had it in you to kick someone's ass. And then, you know, that sort of lets the audience in on what he was grinning about, even if Taylor is still unsure. Brian's impressed with Taylor. No, that's the next paragraph down. Brian says they'll start by cleaning the wounds, then Lisa can use her power to help them determine if they need stitches for a given injury. They had to sew up Taylor's arm and Rachel's ear when Taylor had kicked her. Taylor agrees to take Tylenol, but doesn't like painkillers and thinks that they don't make a real difference for her. Which I know she has like an aversion to drugs that she talks about later. Rabies. I don't think that Rachel's dogs have rabies. Yeah, Vic says Taylor is so anti-drug. Exactly. Yeah. Immune to Tylenol. Says M. Yeah, I mean, her stat buffs are so high that she just can't be affected by these low level healing items. Let's see here. But Brian's impressed with Taylor when she tells him that she already took a first aid class when she got her powers. He made the Undersiders take first aid courses when they first became a team. Alec's general laziness is on display as ever when he recalls having to take the first aid course, and seemingly just the memory of having to do any work has pained him. Rachel makes a sudden snarling noise at some point when Lisa tapes a cotton pad to her ear, and Taylor spooked for a moment. Then Brian smiles reassuringly at her. She looks away with like general embarrassment because she likes Brian. Obviously. I know, spoilies. Taylor likes Brian. This is a shock to everyone. He's so dramatic. Brian gets up to grab more supplies, and with Lisa working on Rachel's ear, Taylor only has Alec to talk to and reminds him that he was going to show her his power. Alec says that the story behind the name Region is a long one and shows a demonstration of his power. He looks over his shoulder at Brian, and Brian stumbles. We learn here that Alec's power is to get into people's nervous systems and fire off nerve impulses. As part of this, demonstration, he makes fun of Brian for falling. Pranked hard. I use my superpower to make you trip. Pranked. Um, Brian puts Alec in a headlock and they tussle for a bit in a fairly unserious manner. And Vic dropped in here. This would literally make me more uncomfortable than being attacked by dogs. The atmosphere is light, regardless of what Victoria thinks. Um, Lisa gives some examples of how they can use Alec's power. To fall over mid-step, to make someone drop something, to make someone lose their sense of balance, or pull the trigger on a gun. Taylor underrates his power, but also acknowledges that she's maybe underrating his power. Let's see here. Taylor says she thinks she knows what everyone does, but confirms that bitch turns her dogs into those freakish monsters. They aren't freakish. Lisa corrects that Rachel can do that with any dog and reminds Taylor not to use cape names when they're in their civilian identities to help train herself not to mess up down the line. Taylor thinks to herself that bitch seems like a really fitting name for Rachel, and Rachel doesn't, but she apologizes to Lisa anyway. Lisa goes on to say that Brutus, Judas, and Angelica are the only dogs that are trained well enough to listen to Rachel when they're full grown. Let's see here. Watching people fake wrestle is worse than getting attacked by dogs. I just hate how they're like, haha, boys, and just watch them be gross together. I thought about Alec while reading Power. Yeah, that book, for sure. Power is a book that is about, like, what if the vast majority of women in the world gained the power to shock you with their hands? And it's pretty crazy. Pretty good book. But let's see here. M says, give Taylor the ick by play fighting with your friend. And then 2 + 4 × 5 says power from Chainsaw Man is just Alec as a waifu. Huh. I don't know what Chainsaw Man is. I'm not well versed in whatever that happens to be. And then Greg correctly identifies that Janice was talking about the Naomi Alderman book Power, which is, that book about shocking people. Let's see here. Taylor describes Brian's power as making oily darkness that screws up your hearing, and notes that it only said darkness generation on the wiki. Brian smiles and tells her that he put that there in the wiki himself and left out details on purpose because people are more caught off guard when they think they know what your power does, but then there's more to it than that. And Lisa also chimes in that his darkness cuts off radio signals and dampens radiation. So we can see here Lisa's power being like very powerful because it's learning information about people's powers that they don't even know. So that could either help someone unlock a new aspect of their power or like use it in a new way, or it could help them defeat someone by finding a key weakness. Like, it's very obviously we're just seeing yet another crazy use of Lisa's incredibly powerful thinker power. It's like she super downplays it, like Greg says. 2 + 4 × 5. The moment when Brian says he edited his own wiki page is the moment that I got hooked on Worm. Yeah, it's a pretty good good bit. Let's see here. So Brian says that he hasn't gotten a chance to test those aspects of his power, and he says that he he's been able to get along as is. Um, he kind of casually generates darkness from his hand as a demonstration. And then I took kind of a big chunk from the book here. Um, it was like smoke, but so absolutely black that there was no texture to it. It was like someone had taken a scalpel to reality, and the blackness was what was there when everything else was gone. I could even gauge I couldn't even gauge the dimensions of it unless I looked at it from a different perspective. Even then, with the way the darkness shifted and billowed like smoke, it was hard to judge the shape. So the darkness moves upward and starts to block the light from the windows and the light fixtures. Brian closes his fist and the darkness thins out, then disintegrates, leaving the room light again. Um, Once the room is bright, Taylor realizes that she's surprised it's not later. Tattletale knows the exact time as 4:41 because of her power, reminding Taylor that it's always on. Brian asks Taylor if she needs to be somewhere. She says her dad will wonder where she is. Lisa tells Taylor that she should call him, and then she lets Taylor know that she can keep hanging out. Alex suggests pizza before the others all non-verbally protest, or maybe everyone's sick of pizza and we could order something else. When Brian asks if Taylor wants to stick around, she deliberates for a minute. She thinks about Rachel, if the fact that she's not in good enough shape to make like a meaningful attack, and then she wants to stay and thinks about wanting to dig for information, then overtly thinks, I'd also miss socializing with people, even if it was under false pretenses, with a group that included an apparent sociopath. It had been a sucky day. Just chilling out sounded good. And then Vic adds here, Taylor is a repressed extrovert, and I definitely agree. She thinks she's an introvert, but she needs more friends. Deciding to stay, she goes to the kitchen to use the loft phone to call her dad. Vic has said in the chat, Alec thinking of what other people want. What a king. M says, she's like, now this is the crew. Slightly crazy people. The others sort of get things ready for them to hang out, and Taylor calls Danny. It's a short conversation, but I feel like a lot is conveyed to the audience, but beyond the direct dialogue, since we have seen Danny's direct perspective before, and so recently, we can sort of extrapolate from that. And Taylor starts casual, but Danny's worried about her. She says she's fine and asks if she can hang out with people tonight. Danny's worried enough by what's been happening that he pauses to think, then tells Taylor to say everything is fine if she's being forced to make this phone call. Vic says, I'm so proud of Danny for this, heart, in the doc. If she's actually fine, he wants her to say her mother's full name. Taylor feels embarrassed for a moment, even though she's out of earshot of the others, but she knows he's just worried and trying to keep her safe. Annette Rose Hebert, I told him. Really, Dad, it's cool. You're really okay? Better than ever. I kind of made some friends. It's funny because in the audiobook, Annette Rose Hebert is actually like, he says it wrong. He says Anne Rosette Hebert. Anyway. Vic says in the chat, just actually being a good dad and thinking about what could be happening to her. I don't think a lot of parents would have done that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Let's see here. Taylor notices the gun on the table, as seen here. What are they like? Danny asks. They seemed like good people, I lied. I think it is a really great chapter. I guess I don't necessarily have as much to say about it as I've had to say about like some of the other chapters, but I just think it's one of those first ones where they capture like a lot into one chapter. Um, let's see here. M says we had something like that my parents tried to implement. There was a code word for if we were in trouble. All right, all right. Yeah, some sort of string bean. Um, swordfish, that kind of thing. Um, it was some lady's name, but it always backfired because I could never remember the lady's name. Oh my god, that's so funny. Oh man. Uh, okay. So, let me think. I feel like I have a little more to say about this chapter other than just how much I love it. I think we get a little more dialogue. Like, obviously, the dialogue's pretty shaky in the early book, and there's barely any dialogue in some of the chapters, but I think it really does ramp up, like Vic has mentioned, and it gets more complicated. And he uses a good, like the author, uses a good ratio of um, describing when someone is talking, like saying, he said, I asked, like I said, Brian smiled, and then putting like the text right after Lisa added, like having that, it it doesn't feel like he's afraid to use basic ones, but he also has a good idea of the many ways he can lead into talking. Like I think something like Brian smiled and then putting the text after that, like you can sort of imagine what his tone of voice would be, and it's not taking another few words to tell you that he talked when it's clearly him. Um, let's see here. Um, M says I would go, Aunt Jemima or whatever, and they would get the gist of it. Hmm. Vic says, I mean, I guess the code still worked if they understood that you were in danger. So it was slightly successful. Um, Vic says, so the next chapter is an interlude, which means it will be from someone else's perspective. At M, whose interlude are you most excited to see so far? Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'll let M ponder that. Or any new readers who have not read the book, but I think at this point in this chat, M is the only person. Unless we have some secret viewers like Quinn or Jordan. But I want to see one from Brian, but it's just him being giddy about Taylor. He's like, "Dear Diary." Um. Okay. Yeah. Oh, M, what do you think about what do you think about the Alex Power? You just learned what it is to set off people's muscles, knock them about. Today I met a really cool girl. Um, and there's just hearts around it and like BXT everywhere. Well, you could do like a split screen montage, I think, of that scene with him writing in his diary, and then essentially Taylor writing exactly the same thing except just gender swapped. Today I met a really cool guy. Alex Power is spooky to me. Uh, like he could just make people dance mid battle if he wants. Uh, yeah, it's pretty spooky. Um, it's a little bit spoilies, but there's a point where he makes someone retch by setting off their gag reflex over and over, and he like so that person's just sort of stun locked into trying to not throw up over and over again. It's bonkers. Um, it very much makes you think like I'm glad I'm not fighting him. Um, oh yeah, Greg's right. Just think of the social embarrassment. Um, Like, that's horrifying. Um. All right. Did we have a weekly question this week? Well, I kind of have a lot more. I kind of have more to go over. I have a surprise for this stream. Before I even get to the end of episode stuff. I don't have a question, but if someone can think of one during the stream, then go for it. I literally forgot to make a question. Like I said, I was going to do it on the last week and then didn't get to it. But yes, I do have a surprise. So I wrote a one-page fanfic that is Danny's perspective in the like short time leading up to the call and then during the call. And it's just very brief. This is the first fan fiction I think that I've ever written. And I wrote it this morning. But here we are. While I'm reading it, I'm not going to look at the chat. That's just gonna, be a thing. So Danny looked over, and the clock said it was 4:40. He was downstairs waiting for his daughter Taylor to get home from school. She was only 10 minutes later than usual, but after last night, and where would she be? From the conversation he had with her this morning, she sounded like she still didn't have any friends. He had been waiting near the side door in the kitchen, but began to get restless. Getting up from the kitchen table and letting out a slow breath, Danny tried not to worry. He walked to the front window and looked out as though Taylor might be out there. Nothing. Danny wondered where Taylor was. During their conversation at breakfast, she hadn't mentioned anything about this afternoon, but she had hardly said anything at all. Thinking about that conversation made him feel the emotional gulf between them again. He felt the urge to call Annette to ask for guidance. Danny Hebert sighed. Unable to shake off the nervous energy that had been building in him, Danny walked back to the kitchen. He took a long look at the phone. Realizing how long he'd been staring at it, he reminded himself that Taylor didn't have a cell phone to call, even if he wanted to. He glanced over at the clock, just as it changed to 4:42. It hadn't even been 15 minutes, but he was already feeling a pit in his stomach. Where could she be? Was she held up by the bullies? Was this connected to her going out last night? Danny had confirmation this morning that she was still being victimized at school. He didn't know what he could do to help his daughter. He ran his fingers through his hair and let out a slow sigh to calm himself. Still standing, he started to pace. The phone rang. Danny quickly stepped over to the phone and picked up.
Hey, Dad.
Danny was surprised at the sound of Taylor's voice.
Taylor, are you all right?
He was pretty sure she could hear the emotion in his voice.
I'm fine, Dad. Is it cool if I hang out with some people tonight?
This didn't feel right to Danny. She sounded fine, but who could she be with? Taylor didn't have any friends. He didn't want to pry, but he decided he couldn't back down like he had last night. Danny needed to make sure his daughter was safe and not being coerced by her bullies. He had to think of something she could answer to give her a way to communicate to him. Annette would have known what to do. She was so clever with words.
Taylor, if there's anyone that's making you make this call, the bullies or someone else, tell me everything is fine. If you're not in trouble, tell me your mother's full name.
He felt uncomfortable saying it, and the moments before he got a response felt like a long time. Annette Rose Hebert.
Really, Dad, it's cool.
There was a break in the tension Danny had been feeling, but he still had concern gnawing at him.
You're really okay?
Better than ever. I kinda made some friends.
What are they like?
They seem like good people.
Yeah, so, that's what it was. Um, so, yeah, I was a little nervous about that. I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but I liked it. So, let's see. I'm going to review the chat a little bit. We obvi love Danny too much, lol, from Vic. Greg says, and I was also there. I was the coolest, and everybody loved me. These are probably responses to what I was saying, but Vic says, we can say anything in here, unsupervised. Hashtag unsupervised. Says, and then everyone clapped. I always sound like I don't have any friends. Vic says, in your fanfics? The phone again! 2 plus 4 times 5. But who was phone? M says, OMG, technical juju in this. You had to cut up that audio. The absolute dedication. Vic says, hell yeah. Greg smiles. Vic says, and that was so sexy with words. And then I think this is where it ended. Vic said, yay. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, I love how you excluded the clips of the clip of Anne Rosette Hebert. Yeah, I thought about including it, and I was like, no, I kind of just no. Thank you for the hell yes and the claps. And then can you title streams on YouTube? I'm sure I can. I probably should. M says chat review. Vic says, I think it turned out great. You must have spent all week on it. Yeah, I must have spent all week on it. Yeah, I think I think I can. I'll try and start doing stuff like that. I'm trying to add little elements like that Turtle Cat, where I'm like just upgrading the general performance of like having every stream named is a good little goal, but you know, I don't want to overwhelm myself with all the stuff, so just doing little bites, as I say to Victoria. Let's see here, getting back to my little document, we still do have a couple segments. We have the themes. So I kind of feel like a lot of our themes are pretty muted in this because she's getting support from people, which allows her to escape not all of, but many of her problems. Like she's not thinking about the tension of being bullied while she's up here for the most part, which it dominates her mind space in a lot of the previous chapters. And you know, the conflict escalation was pretty much averted by Brian in the previous chapters, and so everything's kind of chilled out. They kind of Vic says I count it because that has to do with her wanting absolute control over herself. I feel. Oh, and Taylor hates drugs theme. Yeah, Taylor does want to have absolute control over herself. That's very true, and she kind of, in the same way that M finds Alex's power like creepy, like Taylor, I don't think she says it here, but you can kind of tell as time passes she doesn't like his power. Like the fact that he takes control away from other people, even just like momentarily, she is kind of like weirded out by it, and then it kind of only gets worse over time. Vic says, like Tylenol doesn't affect me because my brain and body are too powerful. Yeah, I mean that's very much that's very true. Like it fits the way she thinks about that, and she would rather, and you see it in later scenes, she would rather feel pain and be lucid than take painkillers when suffering from like a wound. And yeah, we got our viewer here, Hannah. I'm here. I'm queer, and I'm ready to be your girl. M says I'm too strong for Advil. It's true. Taylor, be too strong. Let's see here. Other themes. Blah, 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 blah. I can't really think of any. If anybody has any that they want to say, feel free. But I'm gonna move on. Um, Let me think. No real glossary. We don't really learn anything new there. But on the characters, we just get reinforcement of the characters we've had in the last few chapters. Brian's very responsible, not only making them learn the first aid as soon as they became a team, but also like helping with the actual first aid here and like kind of being in charge of that. Let's see here. We got Lisa, and Lisa is Hannah is saying that she's a big fan of Victoria. Um, uh, well, what do you think of this week's art, Hannah? Let's see here. So Lisa, we get some. I feel like Lisa is in the background for the most part this chapter, even though she does say some stuff. She kind of tends to Rachel for most of it, and I think that this is on purpose so that she can make sure no conflict happens and keep Rachel under control to a certain extent. Um, so I think that there's a good balance of her talking and then her um sort of keeping Rachel away from Taylor. And I agree with Vic. I think that it's so that Brian can bond with Taylor. Like almost right away, she's wingmanning. She's like wingmanning hard. And she won't stop. This will be a continuing theme. Going back to themes, Lisa wingmanning Taylor. That's a theme of the whole book. Greg says we do see a bit of a new side of Alec. He loves seeing Taylor give bitch what for. Um, that that is true. I was gonna say that a little lower, and Vic says she never stops. Which is very true. Wanted to touch upon Rachel real quick. Rachel's like not fully cowed or whatever, but she's willing to stop, and she's made her little power play, and it went. I think from her perspective, I think it went fine. Um, um, and then in the chat, did Freaky Bug stuff happen yet? Not this week. There was actually like no bugs this week. I don't think they even mentioned bugs this week. Vic says, yeah, Alex seems in a pretty good mood this ep. Like explaining his power and goofing off. Greg says, also make sure to show up next week, Hannah. Victoria is going to be co-hosting for the end of arc episode. It's true. If you miss next week, you'll miss Vic week. So there you go. Vic says, I feel like he's usually more bored. I do feel like he's usually more bored, but there's rare occasions where he gets to, watch people kick each other's ass. It's like once a month at best for him. And, he needs constant entertainment. He's like a Roman emperor. Bow before me. So yes, what I wrote for Alec is that he's bored, sarcastic, likes violence. Like I literally didn't write anything for the other three characters. I just had their name there to talk about them. But Alex I actually wrote about because we knew so little about him, and I feel like we just gained some insight despite how few words are actually used on him. Let's see here. Hannah says, damn, my Saturdays are usually days where I see people IRL, so I'll have to see. I don't know, yeah. We'll see what happens. 2 + 4 × 5. He's like a regent. Almost like a regent. Some would say that. Not I. I would never say that Alec was regent. But, some would say that. Hannah... but I do want to hear Vic's voice. Just listen to Avril Lavigne. Yeah, well, shockingly similar. We will not dwell on that part of Victoria's voice. um, to the powers, knowledge, and world building section. We kind of learn a lot. We get more about really all four of their powers. I'll just go down the list in the same order that I did the other characters. Um, uh, Brian, we learned about his power, like, sort of. We saw it last chapter, but this chapter we got to see it sort of move around. We saw how it kind of flows upward. He can kind of choose where it goes to a certain extent, and then he can choose to dismiss it kind of at will. Um, and then I mean, we learn at that point that he edited his own wiki to surprise people with the other aspects of the power, which, as 2 + 4 × 5 said, is kind of like a great moment. I think it's like an iconic thing about this series, like someone spreading the misinformation so casually like that. Um, let's see here. Um, Let's see here. Vic says, "Yeah, I was wondering how in control of location he is of his darkness. I think at this point he has like a pretty solid control over where it goes. It does flow out a bit, but I think that's more to do with him like allowing it to. We'll see him in a couple arcs throw down like really specific darkness. They're walking up the stairs in the loft, and he throws darkness on each stair individually. Um, and he can aim it at one person, yeah. Uh, and then he can also like bloom it out like a big plume of smoke. So like they could have it flood out in front of them if they opened a door, so that they're not visible at any point. 2 + 4 × 5 says, "I think Brian is the only one that can see through his darkness. But yeah, he could probably put it around one specific person's head." Yeah, yeah. I think that's a thing. Um, and then Hannah says, "What's your favorite power from the series?" My favorite power from the series. Ooh, that's a really, really tough question because there are so many. And like so many really compelling ones. Um, I like this one power from like a hero cape where she kind of embeds herself in an area and all these ashes form around her, and she can move through the ashes and plant down more ashes, and then if she so chooses she can like just alight them all on fire, and she becomes essentially invincible while she's set up one of these areas of ashes. So she's just like can embank in an area and then eventually burn it out. It's like a really like I don't know. It's not sounding crazy when I'm describing it, but the way that it actually works is just really cool and like interesting, I guess. And then Vic says, "I think Genesis's power is a standout." Yeah, Genesis has the power to like uh generate like how to say projections of like animals and like creatures and stuff that they can kind of choose the form of as they're happening, and it's like a power based on dreaming because the character falls asleep and dreams the power, and then they rejuvenate themselves by staying awake. So yeah, it's really cool. M says, "I like the bug one." Yeah, Taylor's power is really cool, and like it gets so like deep with what happens with it. Oh, also another standout is Golem. I'm not gonna get into every single little power, but Golem's power is crazy. Um, Greg says, "I like Trickster too." Yeah, Trickster has the power to um Trickster has the power to swap the places of things with teleportation, but they have to be relatively equal, like mass. and the further apart they are and the more difference there is in the mass and the shape, then the harder it is for him to do. But for similar objects, like two similar sized people, he can pretty much freely swap them. And like he can change somebody out after they've pulled the trigger on a gun and make them take their own bullet. Like, that's how good he is. Hannah says, imagine knowing everyone's secret identity and story. That would be a cool power. Yeah, there's kind of a power where somebody has a sub power where they can see this like mosaic behind other super powered people that gives him some like insight into who they are, and that's like a really, really powerful perk. Greg says the travelers overall are sweet. Yeah, yeah. Hannah says you could also push it to the extreme. 2 plus 4 times 5. My answer probably has to be Bonesaw. Yeah, and then Vic says true about the answer. Bonesaw is really crazy. Like, there's just so much about Bonesaw that I never like would have thought of from having seen any other like superhero media. It's just so, it's like, what if Dr. Frankenstein could in real life Frankenstein two people together, and also she has a prehensile spine. It's just like there's just so much, and there's always more like weird things to Bonesaw's stuff. And then Sigma Jargon says, out of curiosity, have you read Twig at 2 plus 4 times 5? I haven't read Twig, but apparently Twig is about just a setting full of bone saws. And it says, Vic, would you rather live in the real world or in the worm world? 2 plus 4 times 5 says, I haven't, but it's next on my list after I finish Ward. Oh, yeah, just as a temperature check, 2 plus 4 times 5, are you finished with Ward? And Greg, how far into Ward did you get before you stopped? Hannah says, that goes to you, William. Yeah, would I rather live in the real world or in the worm world? Vic's answer, the real world, unless I get a power, then worm. That's also my answer. Living in the worm world when you don't have a power is, not ideal. What power would you want? Well, here's the thing about wanting a power. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, I finished reading Ward 5.11 this morning. Okay, cool. I got where you are. I recently reread that part of Ward as well, because, like, I read Ward constantly. I love Ward so much. Like, I have to spend all my time with Vic trying to not talk about how good Ward is, because she hasn't started it yet. Oh, man. Vic says, but I'm power hungry. And then, Hannah, you don't get to know our powers yet. Yeah, Hannah says, I'm just hungry. Vic says, but we will be discussing them later on. Yeah, we will be discussing our powers. Vic and I have already pretty much established powers for characters who are us enough. And I'm excited for that later on. But I think that for the audience who hasn't read the book before, we need to get a lot further in before the setting is like parsable in like, I don't know, just like the power system is really complicated and there's a lot of background and world building. Like, there's even like, I felt like I understood powers when I finished Worm, but then I read Ward and I was like, oh, now I get it. Over and over again throughout the entire story. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, random idea for this week's audience question. What is the scariest possible superpower you can come up with? Oh boy, that's a good question. That's gonna be the one. I think that should be this week's question. Like, people should have a week to come up with answers for what is the scariest possible superpower you can come up with. Thank you, 2 plus 4 times 5. That is a great one. M says bloodbending. M, I feel certain you can come up with a scarier power. Greg says, I don't remember my exact stopping point. Practical Guide to Evil wrapped up recently, though, so I'm going to go back to Ward and push through. Hannah says, the scariest superpower would be to be able to make people soil themselves at will. I guarantee you there's already capes like that in this setting. Think scarier. Like, what if you soiled yourself and then that thing that you pooped out was like a parasite that started eating your body for nutrients, and then it would like grab on to other people and be like a defensive trap in an area where your body died? These are the kinds of like levels that we gotta be talking about. Greg says, the power to make guys uncomfortably fake wrestle. Vic says, oh god, I hate those ones. Which could be about what Greg said, or it could be about what I said. I don't know. Greg says, yeah, Breed and Nursery are both high bars, but we haven't met them yet. Yeah, but I was just thinking, like, Breed doesn't even seem that far out of the ordinary. It's like, there's just a lot of people who like, I don't want to fight them. Oh man, Nursery is like a nightmare. Like never fight her. And then the scariest power would be to bring back my mom. God damn it, Hannah. Vic says, oh god, no, I hate Breed. Breed, says M. Hannah says, Breed? Yeah, Breed is one of the worst dudes. His power is quite awful. He will be much later on in the story. And Bread, yeah, Bread, that's another character, Hannah, Bread. Famous worm character, Bread. I am... Yes, I don't have that much more to say. I guess, you know what? I want to pad out the episode a little bit. I want to talk about how Alec and Rachel and Taylor are all masters, all on the same team. They all do totally different stuff. Alec knocks people around with their own muscles. Rachel pumps up dogs into super dogs. Taylor is the hive mind of a bug swarm. And she knife fights. Vic says, oh god, will you mention they all just stand there? Oh yeah, literally all 5 of them. It's great. They all just, I mean, on one hand, Brian and Taylor and Rachel like punch and weapon people, and Alec tasers people, and Lisa stands there. But all of them have the stand there power, as Vic describes it, where it's like just a power. Oh, and I didn't go over some of their powers already, so I'm not right at the end. So yeah, they all just have a power where it goes without them needing to move around, and they can just stand there. And so yes, Alex swings his arms around. I think that might help him with the power, but like literally he doesn't put out an arm at Brian. He just turns his face to look at him, and then just by looking at him, it sends him sprawling. Vic says, but like they can just stand kind of far away if they wanted to. Yeah, I mean, all of them can do that, but we'll see which ones of them do and don't stand far away. 2 plus 4 times 5, read part of the bread fic. I am unaware of this bread fic. Maybe later I shall learn of it. I'm sure it's heavily memed out. the memeiest. Um, but yes, so we had talked about Brian's power for a second. I jumped into saying the thing about the wiki. Then yeah, I think he's just got a great power. Uh, like it really throws people off. They lose track of which direction was which in on top of everything else. So they usually come out like super disoriented. Um, Great in conjunction with everybody else since like uh, oops, I'm gonna sneeze. Maybe not. No sneezing. Um, if it happens, it happens. Uh, with Rachel as maybe the only exception, everybody else on the team can like operate in his darkness to a certain extent because of having extra senses. Um, and Rachel's dogs can smell in the darkness, so if she's riding them, then she can operate there too. So their whole team can fight in his darkness, and most of their enemies can't. So it's like really powerful combination. Um, Alone, he's a little weak, but he can still like throw up a whole cloud and just like hit people with a baseball bat. Like that's still pretty strong. Like how are you gonna beat him? Line firing endless bullets? Probably not. Um, yeah, can Alec normally feel where other people are? They never mention it. He can reach out and feel because and it would help with fighting baseball bat equals greater than bugs, says Hannah. Um, I think you would be shocked. Uh, baseball bat equals greater than bugs. Um, yeah. So he in his chapter, he kind of can with someone he's used his power on more times, and then in the fight where he and Dragon are in the same area, he senses that there is a nervous system within um Dragon's mech suit. So he can sense out to sense for nervous systems and stuff. So he can directionally feel people. Hannah gets countered by Vic with "You can't fight bugs with a baseball bat." Just saying. Um, I fight bugs with a baseball bat all the time, says M. Um, and Vic says maybe it's like reaching out with a hand. You already have to know where someone is to reach out to them. Yeah, that could be it. It could be that he needs essential like knowledge, whether it be through having seen them already or being able to hear them. Um, it's never directly clear to me like how he senses other people, and it seems like the more he's used his power, the less he's like focused on the area around him. Like he gets more and more like sort of lost in it. So yeah, it's hard to tell. I think that's kind of undefined with his power, but much later on, we actually see his siblings, and at least one of them has the power to just directly sense where people are with their power. Let's see here. Hannah says bugs fight me with a baseball bat. Oh boy. Um, Moving on to Lisa's power. Um, Lisa's power is awesome. They can use it in this instance for medical stuff and like to see if they need to do stitches or not. So it's like just very useful in an immediate sense. They can tell what medical treatments they'll need. Like later on, they'll be in like a little hospital and there will be medical equipment and like Tattletale needs accurate data from the medical equipment, but if they get scans, then she can use her power on the scans and then get like however many extra steps further because they're starting with med equipment. It's like really great. And I mean, yeah, it's just such a versatile power. It does so much. And like the fact that we're reminded it's essentially always on when she just knows what time it is. Um yeah. What a good power. And then With Rachel, we get the new knowledge that she can use her power on any dogs, but that she has her specific 3 dogs very well trained, and that's why she only uses her powers on them, because they're trained specifically to stay under her command while using the full extent of her power on them. Vic says she can tell things about people's powers that not even they know. Super helpful. Yes, we'll see that in tons of upcoming like battles, and like other people join them as allies, so they'll learn things about like other people's powers that they didn't know. And like she starts building up powers knowledge within the world that Vic says no way they would survive without Tattletale. That's absolutely correct. I think she's probably, I don't know. I think like pre-Taylor, she's probably the MVP of the team. Because like honestly, Rachel could be switched out for another like muscle style power. It'd be hard without the mover aspect, because it's like mover and brute from Rachel, because of the dogs. But like they could get by with just another bruiser. But like Lisa's power is so powerful. Greg says, might be worth keeping track of instance in notes of things that Taylor later emulates. Yeah, I can try and keep track of that. Thinking of the time tracking. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Taylor will find a way with her power to track the time. Like, she'll find a way to, like, hamper people in a similar way to Regent, I think. Um, I yeah, she very much emulates everything that she can from all the successful capes she sees. Um, and then let's see. Hannah says, would you say you're strong? That's a good question. You're a Coast Guardian. Are you able to do a push-up? Vic says Tower's real power is plagiarism. It's true. Em says I am weak, very weak. No push-ups. How are you gonna pull someone out of the water if they guard off a ship? A Coast Guardian of the Coast Galaxy. 2 + 4 × 5. More like plagiarism. Am I right? M says they will die. Okay. So yeah. Rachel's power, pretty cool. We don't learn it here, but I think it's worth mentioning that it tires her out to use it rapidly. So that's another little nuance that like we'll just learn over time. And she is able to use it without draining herself by using it slowly over time on the dogs, over the course of like many minutes rather than like a minute. But she can like just burst them up if she needs to. She just like will be winded. It's like the old school version of Nightcrawler, how if he teleported somewhere, it made him feel the like effort of having ran there, but just instantly. Man, Nightcrawler's power had a lot of cool aspects to it. He had like an almost worm-like power where the other person he teleported would also feel like they were winded, but later he trained so that he could do it without feeling the strain of it, but the other person would still feel the strain, so he would teleport to somebody, grab them, move back and forth super fast, and then just drop them, and then they'd just be completely like enervated, and just down for the count. Old school Nightcrawler was awesome. He also had this power to fade into the shadows if it was dark enough. Like, I know he was dark blue, but like he literally would like, you know, superhumanly chameleon into the shadows. So pretty cool stuff. He's one of the X-Men that made me as a kid be like, this is the best superheroes. Just because of him mostly. There's a couple other cool ones. M says like Batman. You know, it's not like Batman. It's like it works the same as the way Batman's does, but Batman's just supposed to be stealthy. Nightcrawler, he be a living shadow. Just like in Lego Batman. It's just like in Lego Batman. But Batman is the shadows. I think you're thinking of Bane. Bane is the shadows. Batman merely adopted the darkness. Let's see here. Anything else about Rachel's power? I don't think so. I think we'll talk about other stuff later for that. There's obviously way more to it, but Alec, so his power, we talked about it a lot. I think it's really cool. I think it's really underestimated. Like, once you see him actually in combat, like no one with a ranged weapon can use it, kind of thing. Like, pretty good. Pretty good. Plus, he complements it by having a taser. So, like, if somebody's stumbling around and you just tase them, then, you know. Batman is totally a tinker, right? Like, with all his gadgets, says 2 + 4 × 5. Vic says, I think his powers, Vic says, I think his power sucks still, but that's okay. Well, okay. Okay, fine. Everyone can think that Alec's power sucks. I think Batman pays for those gadgets. Yeah, it depends on the Batman. Some Batsmen definitely make their own gear. But the ones you see in the modern movies are definitely just buying the gear. Like, you see that whole Morgan Freeman segment of the only Batman movie I've seen where the bad guy is Qui-Gon Jinn, and you're like, wait, why are you in this movie? You're supposed to be a Jedi. Let's see here. M says, Victoria, why do you think his power sucks? Hannah says, Batman is a queer symbol. 2 + 4 × 5 says, he probably at least has a tinker working for him. Vic says, because he's just standing there. Iron Man is a real tinker. Yeah, Iron Man is exactly a real tinker, where, like, the entire Stark Industries literally can't make the same stuff that only Tony Stark by himself can make. Like, you know, thousands or possibly tens of thousands of R&D people can't, like, effectively make an Iron Man suit. Only Tony Stark alone with his robot buddy, Jarvis Johnson, can do anything. Vic says he's very vulnerable. That was about Regent. Says you want him to be mobile. Vic says it's not just it's just not a power I would want. I think, okay, much in the same way, I would be annoyed if that was my power. Much in the same way that, like, I think Trickster's power would be, like, really hard for me to use, but I think other people would be really good with it that I know. Like, I think that, like, Kaysen would be amazing with Trickster's power somehow. I think I would be really, really good with Alec's power. Like, just the no frills version you see before he breaks out his secret weapon. Where he's just able to make people jerk around. Like, I think I would kick ass with his power. I'm like Taylor, where I think I'd be great with all the different powers. Let's see here. 2 + 4 × 5 says Syndrome from The Incredibles is obviously a tinker. Yeah, definitely. Vic says, ironically, my power is also just me standing there. Yeah, so is mine. My power is a just standing there power, but my power makes other people not just stand there. Hannah says, my power is to sit there and look pretty. Vic says, it's because Kaysen has trickster personality. It's true. It's true. But Hannah, there are many powers where just sitting there is perfectly fine. I'm thinking of a power from Ward where you just sit there and you become an invulnerable, immovable object. Pretty good. Pretty good. And you can hover around at very low speeds. So that's a real power from the book. Let's see here. Yeah, that's the thing, Hannah, is like the breadth of the different powers is like very vast in this. I know that you've only you've only been here for a couple total chapters, uh, but like just the variety within what we see is pretty huge. Like Juggernaut, no, there are powers that are a lot like Juggernaut, though. There's a character who, every time they take the same action, the action is stronger each time, over and over again, with seemingly no upper limit. So they would do things like punch a bank until they could punch through the bank vault and then make off with a bunch of the money, and they couldn't really be stopped because of how powerfully defensive their power was as well. So yeah, there's like some Juggernaut alikes, but there's always a twist. There's always something. And it always comes back to like the mindset of the cape. Like they have to have something in their mindset that makes them think like the power. So they have to kind of either reactivate their own trauma or enact their own trauma on other people over and over again. It's it's like a metaphor, you know, in a book. You know how they have those, right? Greg says the twist in his case is that he chose a name that abbreviates to LOL. Yeah, literally, M's joke about punches a bank and steals your 401k, LOL, accidentally mimicked the fact that his name is a 3-word name so that it's LOL on purpose. It's a simile for a metaphor. That's exactly right, Vic. Some things are similar to metaphors, and similes. Some things are similes to metaphors, and some things are similes to similar things to metaphors. Yeah, the guy with that power is a huge nerd. Let's see. I have bilked out this episode long enough, I think. I had a lot of fun though. The audience participation, as discussed, was what is the scariest power you can think of. And I will be writing that into the Discord. All the links are available in the Discord and in the stream notes. We've got to thank Wildbow for writing the story initially back in 2011. You can support him continuing his writing works on patreon.com/wildbow. He's still coming out with the story Pale. Pale is really good. I've only read the first arc and then I stopped, but it was so compelling. The interlude to the first arc, because it's mostly all in the same like format, so you still get interludes and stuff. But the interlude was so good, just mind blowing. And then so yeah, support Wildbow if you so choose at patreon.com/wildbow. The full text of this work is available at parahumans.wordpress.com, and the full audiobook is available at audioworm.rain-online.org, as well as YouTube, Spotify, all your podcast stuff aside from Audible probably. Just if you have to pay to be on there, I don't think they have done that, but But yeah, it's super great. Love Worm, love Ward. Everybody read Ward. My outros are always terrible. I think you guys are great, but and now I'm stopping the recording.